Hello and thank you to those who have joined us for today's webinar. I do want to mention all attendee lines have been muted to eliminate any background noise. We are also currently sharing the presentation, so you should be seeing the intro slide. If you are not able to see that slide or experience any technical difficulties, please let us know by using the chat panel, and we will begin the webinar in just a few minutes at the top of the hour. All right, we have reached the top of the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to today's GP Office Hours. LBMC Tech can host your Dynamics GP in the cloud. My name is Matthew Formasano, a product marketing specialist for the network engineering practice at LBMC Technology Solutions, and I'll be your host today. Thank you to everyone for joining. As we get started, go ahead and drop your name and location in the chat. As I said, my name is Matthew Formasano, and I'm in our Nashville, Tennessee office. As we go to our next slide, I have just a few housekeeping items to go over before we get started. All lines have been muted to eliminate any background noise. If you experience any technical difficulties, please let us know by using the chat panel. We will be taking questions through today's webinar and will answer as many as time allows. So feel free to submit your questions at any time. You can do this in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We encourage you to use the chat and the Q&A features, as there are many attendees registered for today, so you have a captive audience of users from around the country. After today's event, you will be receiving an email with the slides from today's presentation, recording, and a survey link, which I will also drop in the chat shortly. Please fill out the survey. It's very short and it helps us improve any future webinars we do. As an extra incentive, by filling out the survey before midnight today, you will be entered into a drawing where we will select a winner to win a $250 gift card. Now let's go to our next slide to introduce our speakers. Please help me welcome our presenters for today's webinar. First, we have Robert Powell, our Chief Delivery Officer and head of our network engineering practice, and we also have Sandy Wickman, our Senior Dynamics GP consultant. Welcome, Robert and Sandy, and thank you for presenting today.
All right, thank you, Matthew. And thank you, everybody, for attending this session today. This might be a little bit different than the normal GP office hours presentation. But today, as mentioned, we're talking about how you can host your GP deployment in the cloud with LBMC. LBMC has been hosting GP solutions for well over a decade. There are many advantages to hosting with LBMC. You may still be on older on-premise hardware, which is due to be replaced. In the cloud, you never have to worry about replacing hardware again. In the early days of the cloud, some were concerned about the security of having their data in the server and their servers in the cloud. The fact is that your systems are actually more secure in the cloud and being managed by a security provider like LBMC. We have a long tenure of managing Microsoft SQL and the applications that utilize SQL. This expertise resides in both our GP and infrastructure groups. We can keep your SQL databases running at peak performance. One of the complaints that we hear from some clients is that their GP support company and their IT services team are constantly pointing fingers at each other, which causes support delays and problems. With LBMC, both groups are working more cohesively within the same company, resulting in a better customer experience and a more timely resolution. We also perform regular and proactive maintenance and patching on your servers and databases throughout the year, in addition to daily monitoring for issues and helping your users with access and other support issues. Some other hosting providers don't allow you or your vendors to access the servers themselves. For dedicated cloud deployments, we allow as much access to the servers and applications as you need. So where are we hosting your solutions? We do our hosting in one of two cloud platforms, Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. I'm sure all of you are aware of these. These are the two largest and most mature providers in the world. Their deployment options, high availability, and security are unparalleled. We have standards of our own for setting up the hosted deployments, but we can also customize based upon your particular needs. Our ability to customize to deliver the best fits for our customers is a hallmark of LBMC and how we host. We have two models for hosting. One is the shared model and the other is our dedicated model. So most people go straight to the price point, which is lower in the shared model, but you need to understand the limitations and capabilities of both before you make a decision. So as you can see from the screen, on the shared model, while the price point is lower, you have limited access to the environment. There's also limited access for third-party vendors. Normally, the user count is smaller on the shared model, but that's not always the case. And in the shared model, we cannot connect it to your company's Active Directory nor your network. However, on the dedicated model, you typically will see a higher price point, but you also get full administrative access to the servers where needed. Your third-party vendors can also get access into those environments. Again, normally you would see a larger user count on the dedicated model, but that may not necessarily be the case. And then we do ordinarily connect it to your company's Active Directory and connect it to your network. So in the dedicated model, these servers would appear as just additional servers within your network as part of your wide area network. Both models include the same great infrastructure support, GP support, security protection. As previously mentioned, we do SQL maintenance and support on both of those solutions. There's licensing coverage that we provide as part of our hosting. And we do regular proactive maintenance, backups, and other testing. In this slide, we'll review a very simplified version of how we get you to the cloud. So first off, the whole process starts with project management. We want to make sure that all parties, our team and your team, are doing everything that they're supposed to do when they're supposed to be doing it to make sure that we come to a successful conclusion. In the first stage, we perform planning sessions between both of our teams to make sure that we are covering everything to your specifications. We set up and stage the tenant and the base environment and servers, and our GP team installs your GP software and related applications in preparation. In stage 2, we perform the initial data transfer. At this point, we are prepping the new environment for LBMC testing and client testing. In stage 3, LBMC and the client will both perform testing in this new environment. LBMC recommends that the client, that you run the new environment through all the normal activities and processes that you would do in your production environment, just to make sure that nothing is missed. And then depending upon the size of the environment and your needs, the testing phase may take weeks or it may take months. Proper testing is extremely important before we move into the go live phase. So we want you and us to both be really confident that we're ready to go. And then the last stage, of course, is once everybody is satisfied with the testing, we plan the final failover and we go live with cloud-hosted solution. This can normally be done with 0 or next to 0 downtime. The failover can happen during off hours so that it will not impact your production business. LBMC will closely monitor the environment and will be in regular contact with you just to make sure that all is going well. All right, some of our customers ask about common challenges that we have with hosting GP or with GP in general sometimes. First off is email. Yes, we can set up access to your email or to email out of your hosted GP environment, including loading the Outlook client in that environment. We can additionally load your entire Office suite and other desktop applications as well. So this environment can pretty much mirror what your on-premise desktop would look like. Some older deployments may still use VBA. We recommend moving you to GP Power Tools as we move you to the cloud, and we can assist with that process. There are clients that may be running older versions of GP. Yes, we can support running these older versions in the cloud. However, we can also upgrade you to newer versions. As previously mentioned, some are concerned about security in the cloud or even on-premise. These are your company's financials, so protecting them is extremely important. We have a very strong security stack and a well-trained staff. We wrap your cloud-hosted environment with that security stack to protect your hosted solutions. And then we patch and monitor your systems with our staff every day and every week. We regularly audit your deployment to make sure that it is all secure. Security is too critical for us to not take it seriously. As far as your licensing needs, we can bundle your Windows, SQL, and other licenses with your new server instances. So these can actually be bundled with your server instances that come with Azure or AWS. Or we have other methods and packages that allow us to provide these licenses that way. We can be flexible to meet your needs in this, thus having a few different options here. Additionally, we have the capability to downgrade to older versions using either one of these options. So if you need to do that, we can do that, but you're always licensed to go to the latest version when you're cloud hosting with us. And then finally on this slide, many of our clients need full administrative access to their servers and applications. So not only can we give you full administrative access, but as I stated previously, we can also join these servers to your company's Active Directory and connect it to your network. All right, Sandy, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Robert. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to talk about a few of the things from the GP perspective. So in this opportunity on this slide, I wanted to talk about the difference between a cloud application versus hosting your application. So some of the things that have been made available through webinars, through communicated through Microsoft, communicated through other vendors, is that you can use a cloud application of GP, which is a shared application. It's shared by you and a number of other people. You would have a partitioned backend that is your data, but you're all sharing the same GP application. Now, that is not, I repeat, that is not what LBMC is offering, but I did want to call out the difference between that and what LBMC is offering to you. What LBMC offers is what Robert described as you retain the ownership of your GP licensing. Your data is all completely separate from any other customer's data. You can have your own ISVs. Again, the only limitation being whether that's shared or a dedicated environment. And you determine how and when software gets installed and so forth. So very different approaches. There are some situations where a cloud application makes sense. The one downside to doing that for those other vendors who offer a cloud application is that you are required to be on the version that they offer. So you would not be able to be on a different GP version than anyone else who's in that application set. With the LBMC application hosting, you get to define when you're going to do your upgrades and what pace you're going to do those, and you retain your own licensing. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So what else can you do when you're hosting with LBMC? So we have on our GP and network team people who are highly skilled in things like Power BI and Power Automate. So these words are quite popular out in our world these days, like they've become the new buzzwords. So Power BI reporting, right? You could eliminate other reporting tools and move all of your reporting into a Power BI suite. It is a powerful set of tools with a whole different approach to being able to create reports that would be unique and most useful to you in your environment. And then we also have skilled people to be able to help you to begin using Power Automate. So for tasks that may have been tedious and routine, and you have to go push this button every day at 8 o'clock or something like that, there's a ton of opportunity for you to be able to add Power Automate into your hosted environment with GP so that you could then extend your GP life and your functionality to all the things that you might need for your specific purposes. And those are just a few of the things that we can do, but I did want to point out those two. And next slide, please. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the reasons that we've seen why people are choosing to host their GP and to host them with LBMC. So one of the ones is they needed greater access to their data. So as I mentioned before, we have had customers who were in that hosted application environment, but they couldn't get to the backside of their data to be able to do things like maybe some Excel reports that they would pull the data directly into Excel, or if they needed to be able to connect any other ISV that they had, that being an independent solution vendor, that they needed to extend their application further. So they needed access to that data in a different way. And as GP continues to grow, that ISV community, and yes, GP is staying around, and the ISV community is continuing to develop new things against GP databases. So with that in mind, having access to that database data in the background makes things like online or web-based products available to be able to do things like the most recent one that I just did was a scheduling application, where the application for doing the scheduling of their work orders is handled by a web application, and we accomplish that while still having LBMC host the GP application. So access to their data both personally, so an IT person going into the background using SQL, or SQL to a web interface to use their data for other applications. Another one that we've seen is needing other applications not allowed by cloud, right? And then server stability. So there have been a number of customers who have come to us and said, you know, we're still on GP 2013, and we don't really know that there's a reason for us to upgrade. but we need to get off these old servers because the server's going to die and the operating systems aren't supported for these old GP versions. Those customers have a very good opportunity to get their GP application into an LBMC hosted dedicated environment. And then for forevermore, you can continue to use the version of GP that you choose as long as the supporting background functionalities like SQL and operating systems are available. And you also then have an opportunity to decide when and how you upgrade if you choose to. As well, if you decided to go to any other ERP system, you can continue to have that GP hosted environment to be able to go back and look at historical years of data in an interface that you're already familiar with and can navigate. So your people could still go back and look up old things, but not necessarily bring all of that data from many historical years ago forward into a new application, which is a very common thing to be able to need to have view-only access to those things and make it available, but not necessarily need to bring all that data forward. Let's see, let me check and see, was there anything else? Yes, the only other one was, Robert mentioned it as well, where an IT hosted environment really didn't know anything about the ERP application or how to manage it. And I'll give you a good example. So there are recommended best practices for GP to be deployed that include running some routine scripts that keep your data clean, that keep things moving through your GP processes. Those are not IT tasks. Those are GP best practices. And because you have teams at LBMC who are knowledgeable about both, you have the best opportunity to be able to make sure that those processes are being managed by groups who understand both sides of that equation. Sometimes in the focus of only being an IT provider for a host, those tasks don't get managed or reviewed to see if there really are other issues within your data. And next slide, please. Back to you, Robert.
Sandy. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sandy. So up to this point, we've primarily talked about hosting your GP. So what about your other servers and solutions? We can most likely host them and support them as well. So it's very common for us to host an entire company's server farm or a server's entire farm or a company's entire server farm. So such as their file server or another line of business server or a Linux server. For the most part, we can host just about any type of server in a cloud environment. There's very few limitations there. So in that scenario, basically, maybe we start out with a client's GP hosting, but that can become the foundation to moving their entire server farm out to the cloud. For some clients, particularly in healthcare in the financial space, they may also want to host their end users' desktops in the cloud. In this instance, their computers may become like thin clients and they access a remote desktop or a virtual desktop solution that sits in the cloud. These end user desktop solutions are very secure and we can maintain a greater control over what goes into them and what goes out of them. So this works really well with companies that are under heavy compliance and may deal with a lot of PHI. And then another common area, so it's a little bit different type of hosting, but this is with Microsoft 365. LBMC is a tier 1 CSP cloud solution provider with Microsoft. And we have a lot of experience hosting Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams and managing a client's Microsoft 365 environment. Considering that most threats are still coming in over emails these days, it's extremely important to have somebody that's keeping an eye on these and deploying extra levels of security within your Microsoft 365 environment. In addition, what we have seen in, I would say most cases, is when we bring on a client that's already set up in Microsoft 365, they have, it's not properly configured. There's ways that you properly configure and set up security for best practices in Microsoft 365. So one of the first things we do when we onboard a new Microsoft 365 client is to go through that process and secure them. And so what if you need more than just hosting support? LBMC has a full service IT managed services practice, which has been in place since 1996. This is kind of a foundation to what we've done as a business when we started in 1996. We can fulfill any role needed in the traditional IT stack. So that's everything from help desk to system admin to network engineer to outsourced CIO. We can do all of that. For some clients, they need us to perform every one of those roles. So in that case, they're fully outsourcing their entire IT stack to us. For other clients, where they may have an in-house IT staff or part of their IT is covered by another provider, we can do a co-managed offering. With co-managed, we're filling in the gaps that are not covered by the in-house team, or maybe the in-house team doesn't feel comfortable doing those or just prefers not to do it. So we can fill in those gaps. So in the co-managed solution, it's extremely customized just to meet what your needs are. And we really enjoy working with both of those types of clients. And we have high levels of customer satisfaction in both of those scenarios, like in around 98% customer satisfaction feedback. So very successful with that. So summarizing our topics, one, why host? It frees up your internal team from having to manage and support these in-house. There's greater security. We didn't really talk about this third one here much, but it gives us the capability to easily duplicate your production environment for testing, for a QA environment, for planning and testing, for doing an upgrade. So that's a big advantage. It allows your server resources to grow and shrink as needed. When you buy servers in-house, you try to plan for what you're going to need 5-10 years down the road. Maybe not 10, maybe that's a stretch, but definitely 5 years down the road. So you're building that server with more resources than it needs today. But in the cloud, you can grow it and shrink it as you need it. And that's something that we monitor for as well. So when you start to hit the limitations, we can expand it. And when you start to exceed it or maybe not use all the resources, we can update you and save you some money there. And then as compared to building it in-house, you don't have to buy the hardware anymore. You don't have to plan on replacing those. It's all just fluid in the cloud. And then why choose LBMC? We are one company that has both GP and infrastructure hosting expertise under one roof. We provide a lot of flexibility in our hosting, such as admin access and connecting to your own network and software versioning, etc., like we've talked about in the previous slides. We're heavily focused on security. We have advanced expertise beyond just what we've talked about today. And we have multiple models that best fit your needs, whether that's your shared model or a direct hosting model. And then we have a full service IT staff as well. All right, Matthew, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Robert. All right. So I did want to just launch a quick poll just to gauge some interest, kind of going back to a lot of the different options that Robert talked about with what we are able to do, and just wanted to gauge a little bit more interest about if you're interested in more information about hosting in the cloud or improving your cybersecurity stance, having an outsourced IT partner, using LBMC Tech as your help desk, or if you're unsure. So I will leave that up for a couple more moments before we move forward. Just about 10 more seconds here before we close the poll, just so everyone can get their answers in. All right, gonna go ahead and close that. If we would like to move to the next slide, first off, I do want to thank Robert and Sandy for presenting. And before we go, I have just a few more items to cover. First off, Community Summit is coming up in October. And for those of you that are thinking of going, we do have a promo code to save you 10%. So use that code LBMC10 and save 10% off your registration. Next, our next GP office hours will take place June 18th, and it will deal with increasing the versatility of GP with Microsoft Power Platform. So make sure you are able to register for that and join. Next, to close the loop on today's webinar, LBMC Tech offers you 3 cloud options moving forward. We can host your GP, move you to Dynamics Business Central, which is best for manufacturing and distribution, or we can migrate you to Sage Intacct, which has a host of options that it is best for. And then finally, with AI becoming more and more prevalent, we've done the research for you and have compiled a lot of information on our Microsoft Copilot page. It is linked on our Copilot section from our homepage, and then will also be linked here in the presentation, which we'll be sending out. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining. We've covered a lot of content today. Robert and Sandy have done a fantastic job. I have not seen a single question come in, so I'm going to take that they have fully explained everything. However, if you do think of a question later on today, please feel free to reach out to us through our website, which is right there on the slide, lbmctech.com, or you can send us an email at info@lbmctech.com. Thank you all for joining.